Hi again, this is Hilda K. Brody, and thank you for choosing In My Shoes. Today we also have an exciting program. I have two wonderful guests, Mr. Grant Valentine and Mr. Dan Gonzalez, and we're going to step into their shoes for today, and they're going to give us some insight on various topics dealing with reentry and services throughout the city. So first we can go to Mr. Valentine, and you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be here?
Sure, Hilda, and please call me Grant.
All right,
Mr. Valentine, that was my father's name.
All right.
And first, let me just say to you, thank you for your show, and thank you for bringing this important dialogue, discussion, information to the communities here throughout New York City and in particular the Bronx. Because we all know that without timely information and education, people in our community become victims. So this is a very, very important show that you're doing. I've been with the Division of Parole for over 30 years. And during that time, I've worked in reentry. I've trained a number of parole officers in public safety, case law, agency policy. And I've also ascended to the ranks of Assistant Deputy Director of Program Services, which means I ran all the programs in the state of New York. Drug programs, housing programs, employment programs. I oversaw all those programs. And for 2 years, I was Director of Strategic Planning, which means I kind of coordinated the progressiveness of the agency moving forward to a more technological aspect of monitoring parolees. So I've had a very storied career. I was the first African American that was trained as a master instructor for the agency. I was the first African American to be trained as a chemical munition instructor, and actually the first in the agency as a chemical munition instructor. I was the first African American to be trained as a advanced tactics instructor. And I also was the first African American in the agency to actually run the transition program for the agency from New York City. So I've had a very storied career. I retired now, and so now I'm finding other things to do, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But now let me just, and I guess Danny Gonzalez, it's your turn.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Of course, I don't have a long history as he does, but nevertheless, I'm now senior advisor to a few community-based organizations and in the city of New York, and which are national and international based, Strive being one of them, which is an international organization that deals workforce training, headquartered out of East Harlem, and about 30 other states, affiliates throughout the country, and including in the state of Israel, 3 cities in Haifa and Jerusalem, and in England and Ireland, a few others. I stand to be somewhat of a person in community affairs and dealing with the logistics of getting money and finding money for these organizations, and Strive again with an international footprint all over the country, dealing with workforce and unemployment and reentry throughout the international spectrum. I'm also a senior advisor over at Piscolas, which has a national footprint throughout the country, dealing with the reentry program. Well, not reentry, but more importantly, technology-based training, A+ and technology, and now getting together and putting their UDC together, an Urban Development Corporation, with private corporations throughout the country, in trying to bring jobs back to the United States that were offshore. There are a few exciting things happening in that arena we'll get more into as we start moving forward with this. But thank you for having me here.
We appreciate you coming. And recent topics have been basically different aspects of reentry. We've had people who have been incarcerated. We've had people who have worked in the chaplaincy, who are working in reentry programs, who are doing different aspects, housing, because this show is not going to be a soundbite. We're going to do in-depth. We're really looking for solutions. Our people are in dire straits. They really are. And I've been aware of it for quite a while. And I've just been looking around for, well, how can we come up with a solution? Because we could sit back and be at a pity party and, oh, those poor people, and and that does nothing to help that doesn't make them feel any better, that we understand that they're in dire straits, and we really have to go dive in and do something. And I too am retired.
Good.
So
Congratulations
so
to you
I'm
too.
a state employee who's retired, and I just find that retirement is just going to help us to do what we want to do, and when we want to, and how we want to, and we don't have an overseer.
I think when you're retired, people think you're just sitting around watching TV all day. But I've found a lesson learned for me is that I don't want to tell anybody else I'm retired. I've been asked I've been now a trustee on my village board. I'm also asked to be executive director of a program called CGIS. I'm also on the youth board in Rockland County. I'm very active in my church, and they're asking me to do more and more each day, and so I certainly think that when you do become retired, you now can dedicate yourself to doing more community services, things that you really can make a change. I can remember one of my bosses, Mary Ellen Flynn. She was a great lady, and she said to me, "Grant, you're a very talented person, but you have to begin to think about what your legacy will be. How will you make a difference in the world you live in?" And that always stayed with me, and I think it's one of the driving forces behind me about what I can do to make a difference in this world that we live in, not only for me, but for my grandchildren, children coming behind me, because we have to make this world a better place for them.
Exactly.
I think one of the things that when you think about the reentry population and the people who are affected and infected by what takes place, I think we have to go back at the beginning and think about, what do we mean by punishment? What do we mean by the criminal justice system who levies through the court system's punishment? Is it actually punishment? Or are we in an archaic situation back in the 18th and 15th century, eye for eye, beheading? What are we actually doing to make a difference? Because when you look at the data and you see people who are always returning back to prison, are we really punishing them? Are we really making them unhappy? Or is it a new social order that they are developing in there? Because when you're incarcerated, you don't have to worry about a job. You don't have to worry about housing. You don't have to worry about medical care. You may be unhappy for a short period of time, but you create new social order, new friends while you're in there. So when you look at the number of people who are reoffending and going back in the criminal justice system, who are we actually punishing? Are we actually doing something that says to the public that we're doing something and makes us feel good about that? Are we hiding people? Because we're not really changing behavior. We're not really changing what's taking place. And certainly when you look at the criminal justice system that's made up of 88% of the folks in there are people of color, are we talking about power and control? Or what are we actually talking about when we talk about punishment? And I think we have to begin looking at that aspect of the criminal justice system first, in terms of punishment, and then begin to move out into how we begin to correct behavior. Certainly, I think a lot of agencies, corrections, supposed to correct, parole doesn't have the resources to do the things it need to do. So what are we actually doing with that piece of it? And then how do we measure punishment? How do we measure it?
I wasn't sure. I mean, when we were coming up, I thought that the prisons were supposed to be sites for rehabilitation, not so much punishment, but to do things to change behaviors. And then I saw this movie, The Birdman of Alcatraz, and he said that rehabilitation was to invest again with dignity, and I was saying, well, when do we get to that phase of what's going on? Because they are coming in and going back, coming in and going back, and is it because they're not equipped to deal with outside life other than being confined? Or
Well, you look at punishment, and punishment says what? We're going to make you unhappy because you've done something to society and you deserve this. Or we're going to put you in place in terms of power control because you've done something that society doesn't agree with. So we're going to punish you and give you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be, incarceration. And that's going to make you unhappy. It's going to make you feel pain. But is that actually happening? Is that person who's going through the criminal justice system, and I mean through the courts actually, who's levying, and it all starts with the legislators who make the laws, who's supposed to be making these laws that are supposed to protect us and supposed to punish people who they feel have done something wrong against society. I mean, they used to behead you or stone you, right? That's how they punished you before. You felt pain, but now they put you in correctional facilities for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever the case may be, and they're supposed to make you feel pain and be unhappy. But is that actually happening?
Well, I find that the corrections department, that whole word rehabilitation doesn't exist. And when you talk to some correctional professionals, they say the same thing. What you do have is it's like when somebody gets arrested, they go to jail. It's like taking them from the street into another urban environment, and the hanging out starts all over again. There was a time,
It's a new social order. Right.
You'll find that there was a time where they weren't mandated to go to school. They would just sit around. You give them the opportunity. Okay, you either go to school or you can go hang out in the yard. Well, of course they're going to go hang out in the yard. And of course they're going to congregate like they used to congregate in the streets. So as time moved forward with corrections, they started to mandate and realize, wait a minute, what are we doing with our education people? They're sitting around and, maybe 1 or 2 people in the class. Now they mandated that they have to have a diploma, they have to go to school, they have to be in class. Well, at least the federal government, what they do is they make sure that you have to have a diploma before you discharge. So all those kids that don't have to be in school. And they have colleges that come in and everything. There was a time when the state of New York did the same thing, but unfortunately because of the politics of the state of New York, which took away those college courses away, you only have maybe 1 or 2 college courses throughout the state of New York, one of them being very successful but very small, Hudson Link, which started in Sing Sing. And I got to give Brian Fisher his props, who helped put that together and started moving it forward, and saw that education is a tool to keeping people from recidivism. And Hudson Linkage, they graduate about maybe 40 or 50 a year, I think, but that's not enough. And none of those guys come back. You'll find that when you have a college degree and they've put in a lot of education work, and they've learned expand their mind and everything. I have a son that's in jail. I mean, he's in Sing Sing. I'm hoping he steps into the Hudson Linkage program. But at the end of the day, all these other guys that are doing nothing with themselves, if there were more college programs in our facilities, in our state-run facilities, even at the juvenile justice level, more programmatic college or getting ready to work, because a lot of our kids, unfortunately, don't want to go to school. They want to go right into work. So, but you swing back over to the juvenile justice part of it, kids that are coming out of our secure facilities don't have the tools to, they're locked up at 14, 15 years old. They're 18 now when they go out. What do they do next? If they don't got a diploma, which some of them leave without diplomas, they're clueless of what to do next because they went in when they were kids.
So are they incapable of getting a diploma, or?
Oh, they can. See, I wouldn't know exactly why a kid doesn't want to go all the way through school, or I don't know what his mental capacity is. I don't know what his emotional situation is. But whatever it is, if you're in the custody of the state of New York, they have all these professionals and all these wraparound services inside there. Where are they? Where are they?
So there's no vocational training either. So
not that I'm aware of. I know that in the state system, the adult system, there is some vocational training going on in there. Sing Sing being the best example of what happens on the academic side and the vocational side. But I can't talk for the other prison system, the other institutions that are up there. But I can tell you the juvenile justice system, I don't think there's a lot of vocational or any kind of training going on in their system, other than housing them and warehousing these kids. And there's some schooling, maybe some schooling going on, but not enough to prepare them for release. So when they're out there, they have to sort of like depend on their aftercare worker, who's sometimes a social worker or a youth counselor or something like that. But they're sort of like in the model of probation, keeping an eye on them. And if they can send them to a programmatic nonprofit organization like Strive and other organizations that are out there, they probably would, if they could.
So Strive provides the training, or just job readiness or?
No, they do the attitudinal training, the job readiness, and they do we do the hard skills with them. So there's a lot going on with Strive when it comes to, and they don't, they have a lot of different programs when it comes to kids going in there. We get, our juvenile justice population. They do, right now they're doing something with Con Ed. There's agreements between Con Ed and us, and they get jobs immediately after we create a curriculum for them, and then they move forward.
I think it's important what Danny's saying, because if you look at the criminal justice system and how it's constructed, it's not an isolated system. Corrections is what you might call a closed system, where they have their own, actually have correction law that governs what they do and how they do things. It has its own closed system. Unlike, say, parole doesn't have its own law. Education has its own law, education law, which governs how you operate in the laws and guide that. But the community supervision piece is something that's a combination of multiple agencies, programs, CBOs, supposedly working collaboratively together to work with this population with no money. And that's how it actually works.
So there's no, you're saying there's no funds allocated for the program?
Well, as Danny mentioned earlier, you have an educational program that services about 50 to 100 adults, and you have a correction system that has over 50,000 people in it.
So, and that's not including
Dropping the
Bedford
bottom.
Hills?
So
Well, they recently moved into Bedford Hills. They're in Bedford Hills. They're in Fishkill.
Sing Sing.
They're in Sing Sing. They're in about 5 now, but that's it. I mean, there was a move by the governor to get more colleges into the correctional system, but because of the other side of the aisle, everybody coddling inmates, that whole thing, they throw it up in the air, and
So-
this wasn't the right time at this point.
Governor Cuomo?
Our Governor Cuomo. Yeah, he did. He had the will to do it, and he wanted to do it.
So
But
we need
he had to
get-
pull back because of the political climate right now. It would have never passed the Senate.
And education is a very key piece of it. I mean, if you look at all the data says that if a person is graduating college, his likelihood of re-offending is reduced to about 1.0%,
Yeah,
1.2%.
I mean, the
So
recidivism.
it's really, you talk about a public safety issue. But if you look at the profile of an individual who's going through parole corrections, ideally, the person's usually African American Latino. They usually have a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. They usually dropped out of 8th, 9th grade, they dropped out. Some sort of substance abuse history is involved there. And if you look at the number of releasees throughout the country in 2005, let's look at the data here. You had 24,000 releasees in New York State just in the year 2005, 24,000. And that's just releasees coming out. That was 3rd. New York State was 3rd behind California and Texas. And 89% of those released were Latino and Black. And the ages